It's an atomic test.
The Russians have a bomb. We're supposed to be years ahead of them, but what were you guys doing in Los Alamos? And how many people were in these open discussions?
Too many. Compartmentalization was supposed to be the protocol.
We were in a race against the Nazis.
So now the race is against the Soviets.
Not unless we started.
Robert, they just fired a starting gun.
You have a biopic being made exploring this kind of thing, looking into well-studied and familiar parts of history or famous people in history. It's usually pretty boring. Event A leads to critical juncture point F. It's the Marvel hero arc, written into history for all of these people. So how do you make it interesting? Well, if you're Christopher Nolan, you find some way to create a puzzle box of, sound, music, and imagery, and narrative. At least here you get a well-crafted roller coaster ride. And yeah, it's basically just taking, familiar, sort of, biopic tropes like from Amadeus or The Social Network, where perspective and, an antagonism all kind of cloud what is or isn't true. It is a fascinating experience, but more than anything, this is finally a Christopher Nolan movie that's actually about something that you get the sense he genuinely has command of intellectually. Like Interstellar, Beyond His Ken, he had really silly things to say out of that movie. Who the fuck knows what Tenet is supposed to be about? But when you get down to this, yeah, what he has to say is pretty obvious, but he at least says it in a way that didn't make me snort, and roll my eyes. And for that, I'm grateful. It was because, yeah, he gives you all the spectacle until he reminds you that what's actually really important is what fucking happens where there's not cameras rolling and where no one's, keeping a record of what's said and done.
Nope, scratch that. Reverse it.
Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, and that is Chuck, and this is episode 17. In the eternal question of Barbie or Oppie, we here at Theater and Stream have planted our flag in the ground for Oppenheimer, which will be today's featured review. We chose to give the film all of our focus this week and not see Barbie, either ironically or otherwise. But that is subject to change. Before that, though, we've got a bit of news. We've got the watch list to go over. And naturally, we'll end every episode the way we always do with the Mentionables. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And a big thank you to all the new people that have been coming through the channel lately. We've been seeing an uptick in views on our stuff, and we're always grateful for that. But that's the business end of the show. Chuck, I'll turn it over to your capable hands.
Well, I'm a little bit worn out, I have to confess. I was just at the North Dakota State Fair parade, which was quite the spectacle. There was Budweiser Clydesdales, and it was basically just like any other parade you've ever seen in your life. Except we had Ludacris and T-Pain in town last night. But as far as the world of movies go, I had to brave my local AMC, and I'll have you know, I had to call ahead and be like, hey, motherfuckers, you didn't put this 3-hour-long movie in the theater that doesn't have air conditioning, did you? And that poor boy had to assure me that, no, sir, we definitely, have it in a theater with air conditioning. And I was like, good, because I'm going to a fucking movie and I don't want to die. I don't want to roast like I'm getting atom bombed. Walk out of there looking like a ghoul in Fallout. Because if there ever was a ghoul-looking motherfucker, it's this guy Stephen Miller, who, for the people who don't pay attention to politics, he was a Trump toady. And now he's made it his mission post the end of that presidency. He is just spearheading all these lawsuits targeting like affirmative action, rules in light of the recent Supreme Court ruling. And apparently, according to the Hollywood Reporter, Hollywood is next. Is this just kind of overblown, Matt, or is there actually something like to this? Could he completely kick him in the shins regarding their DEI initiatives in Hollywood?
It's right now, it's all theoretical. Nothing has happened yet. But I think that if something like this would happen, there are two groups that are going to see sort of increased scrutiny in the next couple years, and that is employers that have these diversity and inclusion programs in place, and then also entities that have these diversity and inclusion programs in place that take government funding.
Okay.
And so those are like the two groups of, it's not going to affect any one person in particular or something like that, but those are the groups, and stuff like that would include Netflix has a program called The Ladder. Amazon has an unnamed inclusion policy where they aim to cast at least one speaking role in every project they do as a person from an underrepresented group. And Hulu has the Onyx Collective, which is like a sub studio that specifically produces projects from what they term creators of color. And so that's kind of what we're going to see, I think, if it does happen.
And that's the big if, because not only you don't know how some of these judges are going to rule, especially when we're talking about California circuit courts. It's not very likely that this guy's going to be as successful as he maybe has been with some of these lawsuits. But besides the point, like what is he really going to be stopping from happening? Because like you kind of point out here, there is kind of a pulling back happening in regard to like the former full court press that had been going on, in pushing some of these initiatives, and how committed were these companies to these movements to begin with? How likely is it that they're even gonna give this guy something to go after them for when you get down to it?
Yeah, I mean, now that they have a couple of strikes on their hands, I think all this stuff, I mean, it all falls on the back burner. And then, I mean, beyond that, they're just trend chasing, basically. And I hate to call it a trend, but that's kind of how they see these things, as far as, the further and further away we get from situations like George Floyd, the less like Hollywood, we've seen a waning interest in these types of things as the years have gone on since situations like George Floyd. And they really just see it that they see it as a trend, and they just now they're like, oh, on to the next thing, let's just their heart really was never really in it. I'm sure there are individual people in Hollywood that are very passionate about something like this, but once you start grouping people into groups, you find that their morals sort of get all they either fall away or they get so mishmashed that you can't get a large group of people to all agree to be passionate about the same thing. And so it's their hearts were never really in it. Now that Target is done, saying here's our black creator section, the Hollywood is also kind of done with that too.
Because like you pointed out, they got bigger fish to fry. They literally need to fry all of their writers and actors alive, whether they're brown, black, blue, yellow, orange, or otherwise. Because, they just need to have their slave labor and they're the real masses here. They're the big house is the studios, right? Like, I really do believe the Marxist takeover needs to happen in Los Angeles first. You know, like the proletariat really do need to rise up. This is the second episode in a week where I've invoked that language tongue in cheek, but when you look at the ghouls behind a lot of this bullshit, it's all just trend chasing. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, Hollywood was bending over backwards to please Christians. You know what I mean? Or at least appeal to Christians. And it's not that they believed in any of those morals or like their worldview when they were doing that either. Like when Bing Crosby was making priest movies, like The Bells of St. Mary's, like, was it because they really liked Catholics in Hollywood? I don't think that was the case. They just knew that Catholics liked going to movies with Bing Crosby as a priest.
Yeah. And the other thing too that this story has really like crossed paths with is the Oscars DEI rules that are going to be put in place starting this next Oscars. And in regards specifically to that, it's very unlikely that a direct challenge to these DEI rules would be the Oscars undoing, because the Oscars, it's a private organization that does not employ the award winners. Like, they're not employed by the Oscars. Nobody can, none of the winners can like sue them for anything because it's privately done. And the only way in which, something like these DEI rules could be undone is through like a indirect means. So basically what would happen is a studio, would be hiring for a role, and then an actor who believed that they didn't get a role specifically because they thought the studio was trying to, cast a person of color in a role to get an Oscar, could sue that studio. And then if, and this is all like, this is a really big long shot because you would need a hell of a smoking gun to actually win that case.
You would need the email from the Sony executive saying, hey, ditch the white boy and go with the Indian kid, please.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, but hypothetically, if somebody were to sue for something like that and win, I think we would totally see like studios putting the pressure on the Oscars then to be like, hey, let's get that out of there. This is affecting us now. And so as long as these, like we discussed in a previous episode, the Oscars inclusion standards are incredibly easy to meet. And, but once, they start affecting a studio's bottom line, they're still going to go after them. Doesn't matter how easy they are to meet. And so that would be the situation in that particular case.
Gotcha. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. I'm sure it'll only be relevant to the culture warrior set more than anything else, because they're the ones who pay attention to this kind of thing and agonize over what Bob Iger is going to do to, piss them off politically that week. But it does kind of speak to the times we live in, that, politics is very much upstream from culture versus downstream, where I'd prefer it to be. But I don't know, Justified to me was always a show that had that Yellowstone red state blood flowing through its veins. It's Elmore Leonard. It's Southern Gothic cry. And now it's back with City Primeval. And right up front, it's just a little poisoned by where the world is at today versus where the world was at when the show first ended. Because everything is, like, I know, and for some reason, it's in Detroit. I don't really understand. It's that they did that for tax reasons. Because Detroit will, like, pay you to come make a movie in their city because they're just desperate for anyone to come, even if it is to just be like Barbarian and show off the sex dungeons that are available, in certain neighborhoods that have been abandoned. But, and it's nice having Raylan Givens back to a point. We have Oliphant's real life daughter playing his daughter on the show. and that's kind of awkward because she's not really an actress and it shows. But what the fuck is with Boyd Holbrook being in everything and being the same unhinged asshole, madman, wild man criminal in everything he does? He's just always there to menace. He's not there to really do anything else. And there's really nothing interesting about what they're doing with this. The whole time I was watching these first 2 episodes, I was just thinking to myself, I'm not glad I'm here, and I'm not really sure why we're here. What the fuck is the story? It's really unclear. I don't get it. And maybe, I don't know, I didn't read the novels. Maybe these were some pretty choice, entries in the canon that they're inspired by here. But I don't know. Until Tarantino's credit shows up, I'm not sure that I'm going to be very interested in what this show is giving us.
Is it did the original Justified series have like an ending, like a very like pointed ending, or was it like open at all? Do you know?
I can't remember. I feel like it was left open. Like they gave him a happy ending from what I recall. Like they definitely closed the door on some specific characters from what I remember, but because I watched it in a flurry a couple years ago before I moved to like when I was moving up to Minot. It was right around the time that I was just binging it while I was packing. So, but from what I remember, it's not that awkward for it to be back. I just wish they would have tried a little harder, I guess.
So not quite as successful as Timothy Oliphant's return to Deadwood.
No, that much more successful. Like that much more satisfying. And now you making me want to go back and watch that. But looking at our schedule for today, I'm reminded that I completely wasted like 3 months of Apple TV that I had, and I missed out on watching what you're going to talk about next, Silo. Is this something that I need to jump on board for?
Oh yeah, I think so. And speaking of Graham Yost, the showrunner of Justified, he's also the showrunner for this.
That's funny.
Silo.
Okay, because Yost has nothing to do with City Primeval. He has
really?
No directing, no writing credits, and it shows.
Yeah. So this Silo is based on a book series, dystopian book series about a group of about 10,000 people that live in this vertical city in a silo and they've been living there for 140 years, various generations, and they don't know why, they don't know what happened to the world because all of their records were wiped out 140 years ago, and they just know they live there, and that if they go outside the silo, you will die within a couple of seconds, basically. And so that is kind of the premise for the show, and I really, really like kind of where it's going. This is, one of those dystopian things that really gets by on the strength of its world, on all of the world building it does, and the little rules that they have for the silo that all the people live by. It kind of reminds me in that way of like something like the Hunger Games, where the Hunger Games isn't that fantastic of a movie series, but it gets by on its world and its the rules and the different districts and stuff like that. And that's kind of how this is. And the other thing that makes this unique is it's just got a fantastic cast. You got, Rebecca Ferguson, David Oyelowo, Tim Robbins, Ian Glenn from Game of Thrones. Although the one thing I would say is when you look at a poster for the show and you see all those faces and all those actors on the posters, I want to warn people, like, don't get too attached, because about half of those people don't make it through the second episode. So
fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah,
all right.
It's pretty nuts. And the show definitely, this show has, Justified. I think Justified, the original Justified, has one of the best TV pilots ever. Mm-hmm. And then the show kind of finds a groove. It doesn't get worse. It just finds a groove. It's like it finds its sort of lane. And that's kind of what happens here, is this show opens with a bang, and then it sort of finds its lane, and it's just kind of, not as exciting as the first couple episodes, I would say. but still very, very worthwhile. I would
Right
say.
on.
One thing I did want to say, the one bad thing about the show is fucking Common. Oh my
Oh, yeah.
god. He is so awful. We need to stop letting Common be an actor because he sucks. And he luckily, you know, most of the time he just stands there in the background and looks like mean, but he is really bad in this show. And so that is like the one sort of blemish on this series.
There's a lot of people like that, a lot of performers that for some reason, like, oh, because David Bowie worked, everyone just gets to be treated like they have something to bring to the table. But yeah, what was it? Smoking Aces. That's the first time I remember seeing Common in a movie, and useless. What else has Apple got cooking for us? New seasons of some 2 good shows.
Yeah, 2 shows that I've talked about on our show before, and so I'll be quick here. The Afterparty season 2, still really, really funny. This is from Chris Miller, who's part of the dynamic duo of Miller and Lord, and yeah, still a really, really funny show. If people don't remember, the hook of this show is basically that it's a comedic murder mystery, and every episode is a different genre. And the cool thing about season 2 is that now that they've gotten all of the sort of typical genres out of the way, they got to dig a little bit deeper into some more kind of out there genres. So the first couple of episodes, the first one I think is romantic comedy, and then we have a Jane Austen romance, and then the third episode is a film noir, and Paul Walter Hauser plays the gumshoe in that one, and it's fucking awesome. Yeah,
it's funny seeing him be clean shaven.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's so weird, and he's awesome in it. He plays like a tech bro, or like a wannabe tech bro but still lives in his like mom's basement, and so he's really, really funny, and yeah, still really, really great show. And then I've got Foundation season 2, which this is an interesting one because I really liked the first season of Foundation, and I thought it was fairly easy to follow along with, despite the fact that I've never read the book. And I think they've thrown that all out the window for the second season because they're just like, fuck you if you're not a book reader. We're getting bananas. You know, this is going, you know, we're going crazy, and I have no idea what is going on now in this show. And,
all right, then I need to watch it. My time has come.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah, I grew up reading this shit.
Yeah, and it's you know, it makes me almost want to go back and read the book because I can still appreciate the sci-fi that's happening. I can still appreciate, you know, how good of a performance Lee Pace is giving. And the one thing I will say is I know a lot of people have been waiting for this, and the mule has shown up now in the show.
Yeah.
So and he's pretty cool. He was just at the end of the second episode, the latest episode, and it was cool to see that. But yeah, I still have no idea what's going on, and so I don't know. I might try and read the novel or see if I can just push my way through the show. But yeah, I mean, if you like the first season, you'll probably like the second season, barring you've read the books. Or the book, I should say.
Well, it's a lot of different books, and if the mule is already showing up, I have to refresh my memory exactly how, like where the first season ended, because that might have been like the first like book and a half of like, because there's Foundation and maybe Foundation and Empire, because if we're getting close to the second Foundation getting invoked, and that's when everything just gets fucky, you know, that's when it gets really like out there. It, like, I don't know, Isaac Asimov is usually a really hard read, I'll warn you. He's pretty dull, but Foundation gets really bizarre and like really hard to explain. So I'm probably gonna have to read those books and refresh my memory too, if I am even gonna attempt to come back to it. Because I thought I was gonna be getting something a little more bizarre myself here when I watched They Cloned Tyrone, which is a very tired, like, you know, new black surrealist, like, blaxploitation meta film that doesn't say a goddamn thing we haven't heard before. You know, so in that way, I'm a little disappointed because it's a punch. The punchline is the name of the movie. That I'm just gonna put that out there. It's a joke, and you see the joke right up on Front Street all the way through, because there isn't a Tyrone in this movie. Our protagonist is not named Tyrone, but he is a gangbanger. He does like protection rackets for like a pimp played by Jamie Foxx, and one night he gets killed, and then the next morning he wakes up and everything's fine, and everyone's like, "What the hell, man? Yous was dead. You had bullets in you." November's eating some parade candy. And that leads them to try and figure out, well, what the fuck is going on? Because one of the hoes that Jamie Foxx has, it like used to read Nancy Drew books, so they go all like Scooby-Doo on this. And what they find out is that there's like these massive underground silo complexes underneath their neighborhood where there's a lab where they're creating all these like basically mind control or pacification drugs, and the people who are doing it are like white people with black Africans, like afros and hair and stuff like that, but they're white people. It's very deliberate that they are that way. And I don't know, I tried to give it everything that I could, but by the time Kiefer Sutherland shows up to be like, I'm the evil white guy who's, you know, running the secret operation and there's nothing you can do about it, I was done with really giving this a chance, because we've seen how good this kind of thing can be, but I've already seen Black Dynamite, you know, and this wasn't as fun as Black Dynamite was. It wasn't as gonzo as Black Dynamite, and it wasn't nearly as creative as like I'm a Virgo or Swarm, and I was really bored with it.
It almost sounds like a wannabe like Jordan Peele with like the yeah,
but with none of Peele's like actual like technical skill to like actually like give you a good movie. Like if Jordan Peele had made this movie, it maybe would have been good. I'll give it that. But in the hands of the individual who made it, I forget her name. It's like it was her debut film. I know that much, and yeah, she just has to have another run at it. You know, don't give up. I don't want her to do that. She clearly can make a movie. It just didn't quite succeed. Jewel Taylor, that's her name. So yeah, They Cloned Tyrone. It left me whelmed. What did not leave me whelmed whatsoever. What hasn't left anybody whelmed who went to it, because we are Oppie supremacists on this show. What we have going on here is like what has come to mind with like walking out of the theater when I saw this was that quote from Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. You know, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should. And in the case of Mr. Oppenheimer, it was at a time where the logic was, well, if I don't do this, the bad men will. And for that reason alone, they are motivated to just like peer into the deep darkness of the unknown of the exact nature of the universe and bring back something terrible, you know, for reasons of goodness and science and progress and knowing more about the nature of the universe or whatever it is. But of course, there's always consequences for it. And usually when you have a biopic being made exploring this kind of thing, looking into well-studied and familiar parts of you know history or famous people in history, it's usually pretty boring. Event A leads to critical juncture point F. It's the Marvel hero arc, written into history for all of these people. So how do you make it interesting? Well, if you're Christopher Nolan, you find some way to create a puzzle box of sound, music, and imagery, and narrative. And is the only he can, being the dark wizard that he is. He had it in him to go deep into not only like himself and the character, I guess, because a lot of people have pointed out that this is kind of a movie about Nolan as much as it's a movie about Oppenheimer, at least thematically. And when you think about like what his whole deal is and just how committed and holistic he can be, there's a lot of similarities between the filmmaker and the individual that is in this movie. And it's good because we get a movie that is a lot more interesting to experience than, say, the TV movie Oppenheimer that was made starring Sam Waterston, which was probably just like, thing to thing, commercial break, thing to thing, commercial break. At least here you get a well-crafted roller coaster ride. And yeah, it's basically just taking, familiar, sort of, biopic tropes like from Amadeus or The Social Network, where perspective and, an antagonism all kind of cloud what is or isn't true. It is a fascinating experience, but more than anything, this is finally a Christopher Nolan movie that's actually about something that you get the sense he genuinely has command of intellectually. Like Interstellar, Beyond His Ken, he had really silly things to say out of that movie. Who the fuck knows what Tenet is supposed to be about? But when you get down to this, yeah, what he has to say is pretty obvious, but he at least says it in a way that didn't like make me snort, and like, roll my eyes. And for that, I'm grateful. It was because, yeah, he gives you all the spectacle until he reminds you that what's like actually really important is what fucking happens where there's not cameras rolling and where no one's, keeping a record of what's said and done. Because there's small men running the world today, just like there were small men running the world back then. And it was kind of hokey how Alden Ehrlich's character at the end literally just says to this historical, figure played by Robert Downey Jr. how much of a piece of shit he is. Like that was like, oh, come on. But okay, because that's what happened. He was repudiated. He was rejected because of what he did to this one man. So this is a very political movie. This is actually a political movie from Nolan that I think lands. It has a lot to say, and and for that, so on that level, I'm engaged, like all the way around. And on a technical level, this is fucking astounding. There's so much we can say about it, but I've talked enough. Matt, what did you feel when you walked out of this?
Oh man, it was a weird feeling when this movie ended. It was a very like grim atmosphere in the theater, and people were like, I don't know if people knew what to do once this movie was over.
That was similar to mine too. People like there was kids walking out when I was walking out who were just like, I liked it up until the bomb dropped, and then I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah. But yes, I will agree with, mostly with what you said. I think this is just a sweeping movie, an examination of a very complicated man. I think it's the closest Nolan's ever going to get to making Oscar bait. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, like, I think he has a decent shot of actually winning Oscars for this type of movie, because this is the type of movie that they generally like. For me, though, sometimes the movie felt like sort of a recitation of a series of events, in that, like, kind of like what you were saying, like where it's like, okay, now we got to show this thing, and then we got to show this thing, and then we got to show this thing, where you could tell it's based off of a biographical book in that way, where you could see that him adapting those points of Oppenheimer's life. But yeah, I mean, I think he's clearly challenging himself, and that's like the thing he should be commended for, because there's a lot of really strange things in this movie. I really, a little bit later, I really want to talk about all of like the surreal imagery in this movie, because he's such a straight-laced guy normally, and you can tell that he's like experimenting a little bit with this movie. And Yeah, he should be applauded for it. He somehow made 3 hours of conversations in rooms as exciting as any of his other movies, any of his other action movies, any of his other sci-fi movies. He made this film just as exciting. And so that's kind of where I stand.
Yeah, no, it's like the way that like I think it does kind of overcome that da 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 sort of nature of the biopic, is that while it does follow that form, it does layer this like hyperlinked sort of free association that the Dr. Manhattan sort of, here I am in the room hearing, like having to put it on the record that I cheated on my wife. Here I am in the room cheating on my wife. Like because the Matthew Modine's character Vandevar Bush, I went on a Wikipedia tear about who everybody was in this movie, and he created something called the Memex system, which was a pre-internet system for doing that, for creating hyperlinks between encyclopedia entries. And that's kind of what I was reminded of. That's what it felt like. Because you'd go from the color sequence of an event happening to the black and white of someone talking about that event, or something related to it. And I don't know, I was swept along with it. I never felt bored. I understand that once it's all about his security clearance, it gets kind of ponderous. But I was caught up in the drama. I was caught up in the polemical nature of what Nolan was doing here.
Yeah, I wonder if, when you say that the sort of non-linear nature of the movie was to protect against it getting too typical, that is a good reasoning for that, because there are four. I wanted to get your opinion on this. There are 4 criticisms that are normally levied at Christopher Nolan movies, and they're always the same. And I wonder if any of them are true with this one. And what the 4 criticisms are that his films are devoid of emotion. I can't hear the dialogue anyone's saying. The running time is too long. And the movie pointlessly has a non-linear narrative. And I think we already, you covered that last one. But what do you think of those other 3?
I guess I will say I had no issues hearing this movie at all.
Okay.
And I because that definitely is a problem with things like Tenet and The Dark Knight Rises, even Inception. But in this one, this is the first Nolan movie I can think of where there was that kind of oral clarity for me. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't hearing what I was missing. Maybe I'm not aware of what I wasn't catching. It's entirely possible.
Well, I think, since this movie is just a lot of people talking, there was probably a concerted effort made to make sure that you could hear what those people were saying. And so I would say I noticed it a couple times, but it wasn't nearly as much as some of his other films. Like literally in Dunkirk, you can't hear anything Tom Hardy is saying, because he's just like, and it's just like it's pretty bad in some of his older stuff. But yeah, I would say in the entirety of this 3-hour long movie, it maybe happened like 2 or 3% of the time where I was just kind of like, what did that person say? Because in the background you had the like booming score going on at the exact same time that somebody was giving a line of dialogue. So yeah, I don't think it was a problem in this one. The one thing that I would agree with is the running time thing, because I don't understand where people come from when they say that the movie's hard to follow, because it really isn't. Like there's only at any given time, there's only really like I think 4 different time periods going on, like two black and white and 2 color, where it's going between 2. And I don't know, I just didn't find it that hard to follow. I think that you'd have to be like a real dimwit to have that as a complaint. But But as far as the running time is concerned, I do sympathize with people who say that the third act could have been tightened a bit, because it really is like a lot of them sitting in that boring ass room for
At that tiny
for-
table.
with the tiny table. And so I do sympathize with that a bit. I think he could have made it about 2:45, like 2:45 instead of 3 hours, and it would have been just, he wouldn't have lost anything basically.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm gonna argue, the devil's advocate here, the eternal, Nolan advocate that always pops up. I would argue that it's almost kind of an ironic point on his part to be like, oh, you came here to watch me blow up the atom bomb. Well, now guess what? I'm gonna subject you to the procedural hell that happens when the federal government doesn't like you. And I appreciated that, but that's because I'm a weirdo, I guess. And I was caught up in, because I never really fully appreciated like just how wrong he was treated. And and I alluded to this more explicitly in the social media post I made, but if there's a political message to this movie, like a thesis, that's why it's easy to follow if you can think critically and keep track of all the spinning plates, and orient them correctly in your mind, because they're being put in front of you in that order for a reason. Because it's basically he's taken this book that inspired the movie and just ran it through a fucking Nolan algorithm blender, and it's popped out the other end, the way it is. But it's such a beautiful statement about supporting and cultivating intellectual freedom. Because, well, yeah, he likes to hang around with communists because they have the best booze and they let their wives sleep with you. It's like you're also there because you want to be exposing yourself to people who are thinking and who aren't just closing themselves off. And I know that the people who watch this movie today might think of it in the political binary we inhabit, but it's saying something to all of us, because of the closed-mindedness of that time. Look at what was lost because of the closed-mindedness during the Red Scare. We got trapped in that Cold War because the voices who built this thing and knew better than to just let it, be out there unfettered, were pushed aside, and called the enemy because they tried to sue for peace. And you just don't expect a dude like Nolan to actually say something that, graceful, because he's usually so hammy. Like when he was doing the political infusion into The Dark Knight Rises, he and his brother literally phrased their process as throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks. I appreciated him being more purposeful with his with his commentary. But we'll save what his ultimate point may or may not be for later. Let's kind of talk about the technical side of this movie. Is this the first time Nolan has ever made a movie where it's just cut from one person in a chair to the person sitting next to them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I would say so. I mean, you mean just as far as no camera movement, just cut. Yeah, I would say so. I mean,
it felt like a Sorkin, joint for a little bit there.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of interesting that it would be that too, because this is a film that is photographed by Hoyt van Hoytema, who is one of the preeminent cinematographers in Hollywood. And anytime that guy's name pops up, that the movie is worth seeing just for the photography alone. And in this, it's relatively muted. It's very static for a lot of it, until he gets really crazy with some of the practical effects of atoms splitting and neutrons and stuff like that. And what did you think of all that stuff? The more surreal imagery.
like whether it was the subatomic, like when he's visualizing, like what like fission would look like, or even the really bizarre stuff I loved. It caught me by surprise, like the when he sees like the cheering woman just start melting in front of him.
Yeah.
Like
and
all
the guy throwing up.
Yeah, there was just a like when they're caught up in the frenzy of what they've done, like things get really heightened. Like I almost thought I was in Bo is Afraid for a second there, and I thought he was gonna like walk off into some animated sequence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But luckily it stays pretty grounded. But when it does introduce that bit of of the uncanny, it's really upsetting and disconcerting.
Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff like that. I think like one of the very first ones one of the very first parts in the movie where it does that, where I was really taken aback, was when he was sitting in the tiny room, and then suddenly he's naked, and then suddenly he's having sex with Florence Pugh, and his
wife is like actually like seeing it herself too. It's like it's like it was almost unclear who was having that who was seeing that, but it very fascinating, and it will give all the YouTube film essayists a lot to talk about. But
well, one of the things I picked up on, I want to get your thoughts on this, was every scene with Florence Pugh, the color correction of the film changes to like a more reddish hue, and everything within the set, whether it's in the hotel room that he meets her in, or it's in her house, that party scene in her house that they go to initially, the color correction is changed to be really red, and the colors in the scene and the set design are really vibrant all of a sudden. And I want to know what do you think is behind that? Like, or is there anything behind that?
I did not notice that, honestly. But if there's, purpose to it, is it because like she's the Scarlet Woman? She's the whore in his life, because Nolan is a misogynist, as we all know. But if it's anything, it might just be that she made his like intellect, so like she was his muse, his intellectual muse. Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
And and the world was colored different when she was there,
Yeah, exactly. Like it was color different, and almost like, he saw things differently when he was around her, and she, she is the woman that he wanted to be with, but Emily Blunt is the woman that he should be with, basically. And he chose the pragmatic choice, essentially. Like he chose Emily Blunt over her because he's, a man of pragmatism. And every time he went back around Florence Pugh's character, things get a little brighter for him. Things get a little, the world looks a little more bright, a little bit more colorful. And then he goes back to Emily Blunt's drunk and ranting, and his world just is shit. But,
okay, now that I think about it, that is a pretty stark, like now it makes sense, exactly what's going on there. Yeah, there's just, he's trying to do more than just technically wow us. And I appreciate that from this guy, because what got his career started and what got me interested in movies was Memento, and everything that went into that, and all the deliberate choices that are made within it. But what do we make of all of the make work thankless casting decisions that were made for this movie? Because there was, as soon as Rami Malek showed up, I was like, oh, I bet, because he's playing someone important, surely, right? No, he's literally just some random scientist who's in the movie twice.
When he first showed up, I literally thought he was never going to be in the movie again, because the time, there's like a hour and a half between his like two scenes. And in the first scene, he literally just shows up and like drops a clipboard on the ground. And I'm like, oh, was that it? And Yeah, I mean, I think this is just a case of you as an actor will accept any role that is given to you for the chance to work with Christopher Nolan. So you have all of these like, pretty big actors like Jack Quaid and Emma Dumont and Alex Wolff just like showing up for like sometimes they don't even have lines. Like
No.
like fucking Josh from Drake and Josh. I think he says like I think he literally like says, "Should I push the button?" And that's like his only line.
Well, yeah, he
And-
gets to he signed up to be the guy, and that's the thing. The button that he has his hand on is the button to, like, it's the what do you call it when you
scrub it.
It's the
Right.
to the override to the kill to make it not blow up. So it's funny because they in the trailer they make it look like, oh, that's the button that made the thing happen. It was just on a timer. I don't know. I thought that was funny because, yeah, this is like just a lot of shots of like people either talking or people doing things, like engineers and scientists doing stuff. But I don't know, like who in the supporting cast actually was given something to do and actually had fun while they were doing it.
I really liked, I mean, a lot of the actors in this movie are literally having like 1 or 2 minutes max to play around. I mean, like you need to, set the scene and you need to get your point across and you need to create a character within like a couple minutes of screen time. And when I think about who did that the best, I immediately think of Casey Affleck.
Yes.
He was so scary, like, and just like chilling. And so yeah, he did a great job with his like, sub 5 minutes of screen time.
Just menacing, playing a Russian immigrant who fought in the Russian Revolution and is now a like anti-communist like bulldog within the military industrial complex of World War II. Just fucking horrifying. And that's a real person. That's what I loved about this. Is like pretty much I don't think there was any like amalgams. Like they did a really good job of just being like, no, everybody is somebody. Like even like Henry Daldridge, the guy that gets killed by the Demon Corps, he is in this movie in like some shot and someone is playing him. Like that's something I appreciated, but I really liked.
Who's that person? Yeah, who's that
I
person
forget.
for you?
I really liked Macon Blair as the thankless attorney who wasn't allowed to know anything. I just liked seeing him in it, like just getting to act and be in a real movie. Because Blue Ruin is one of my that should have been in my top 10 list of all time in retrospect because I love his performance in that. But now he's one of those guys who gets to be called up like Dalmatian, or like I really liked his little guy who's just an asshole has the plane fantasy, like he's the like that's what he's there for. God, who was the other one? Of course, it's Benny Safdie. He's the key one. I really liked his character. He was given something to do and made the most of it. I think a lot of people are gonna maybe recognize him more, but he should act more and not just in his own movies. Or I know he doesn't. He was in Licorice Pizza, obviously, but I just want to see this guy do more like this.
I think he was also I think he also plays the dad in oh god, what is that called?
The Judy Blume.
The Judy Blume movie. Yeah.
He is. You're right. Oh my god. So never mind. He's getting what I want him to have. But it does kind of bring up the point, though. Are these female roles in this movie thankless?
I think for the most part, yeah. I mean, I didn't like, one of my big like pet peeves, and people, I don't know if people could pick up on this throughout our podcast, but I really hate when movies like reveal their artifice and they take you out of the movie and you can see kind of the machinations of what's going on behind the scenes. And, one of those scenes for me in this film was when Emily Blunt like girl bosses her way through the committee meeting in that tiny room, and I was just like, come on, like she's great, she's great otherwise. I really liked her, kind of being the only one who has a backbone, like for the most part. And at the very, very end there, when Benny Safdie tries to shake her hand and she just gives him this look, just an amazing bit of character, character acting there. I would probably say, I mean, a lot of the women roles in this are just like, because you have Florence Pugh, who's basically just like the sex object, and
did people overblow that sex scene? People were talking about like it was like 15 minutes long.
No,
what are they talking about? Yeah, it was iconic, to be sure. And then her return during during the hearing, during that surreal sequence when like she's like staring Emily Blunt's character right in the face as she's writing her husband. Just for maximum, cut queen humiliation. It was like that stuff is all well and good, but the women in the stories of the great men that Christopher Nolan makes movies about tend to off themselves. YouTube algorithm probably won't like me saying that, but that's a running theme. If you go from like the prestige, I know this is what the real lady actually did, but it tends to happen a lot in his movies. Inception is another one.
And I mean, it doesn't help. I mean, the time period doesn't help either, because the time period doesn't do any favors for the women in this movie, because like you have that scene with I had said her name earlier, but Emma Dumont, who's normally like a pretty big actress, and she plays Oppenheimer's brother's wife, and she's literally like tries to talk to him, and then he like steers the conversation away from her, and that's her only scene in the movie. And so I mean, the real life events, the real life time period of this movie don't do the women any favors, and I don't know if you can really fault Nolan for that, for history basically. It's like he did what he could. It's like the people who are upset that there weren't more African representation in World War II British military or French military in Dunkirk, when he did have some there, but he just didn't have them like making up 75% of the military, but this man can never do enough, but because he tends before we move off the actors, I do want to touch on Robert Downey Jr. for a second. Because he is, I mean, if there is a second lead to this movie, it's probably him.
He's the Salieri to Oppenheimer's Amadeus.
Yeah, and so I don't know. What did you think of him? Do you think that, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. he's definitely gained a typecast over the past, 15 years of playing Tony Stark. And do you think he successfully broke his typecast, or do you think that it's just like, does he have those mannerisms, or does he have that like fast talking like Tony Starkness to him, or do you think he broke that?
I think he kind of broke that, because there's a lot of, I think there's a lot more going on with his performance than maybe most people would even try and see, like let alone pick up on, like during because we haven't really gotten into it, but like how exactly because the black and white sequences were the objective ones, like the for the first person POV, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I think you're right on there.
So because when we're in, so parts of the movie is all just from Downey's perspective, and when we are in that perspective, like when he's seeing the Einstein Oppenheimer interaction at Princeton, and then Einstein gives him the cold shoulder, like because you just see the fakeness in this guy, and Downey does a good job of actually making his mask drop, subtle enough, like it matches the script pretty perfectly. Like by the time you get to the point when he's confessing to the congressional aide that, oh yes, all the evil things they've accused me of, I did them and I loved it, like once we get to there, like because for a little bit there I didn't really think of him as the villain of the movie, you know. But then once it becomes clear that he is, you know, there's no going back, and that's when, yeah, he kind of turns into a cartoon character. But I really appreciated what he did here. That said, yeah, he can't really escape who he is, and who he is creeps through. There's a reason why we don't see like Jack Nicholson doing too many movies like this, you know, in his career after a while. Like, what did he do? Did he do like Hoffa? And then like he was done with the biopics after that. Cause
Yeah. No, yeah, I'd agree with you. Yeah, for the most part, I mean, I think they've purposely, you know, made him to look unlike his normal self, you know, with like the receding white hair and yeah, he broke type for me too. There's a couple moments at the end there where he's, you know, as you were saying, those scenes where he's sort of confessing everything, or he's getting really pissed off because of Rami Malek's testimony, and he's like almost nearly crying. And I was like, okay, you know, you're sort of Tony Starkness is sort of bleeding through a bit here.
That's where it was kind of, yeah, he was slipping back into his grooves a little bit.
Yeah, but yeah, for the most part, really, really great. And yeah,
what about Matt Damon? Did you like Leslie Groves?
Oh, yeah.
Like, he was my favorite. He was my favorite character.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. He was fine. He was Matt Damon's one of those guys who I don't know if I can ever quite see the character he's playing. And you know, a lot of times I just see him as like Matt Damon playing a character.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I did like his scenes. I mean, his back and forths with Oppenheimer were always really, really fun because they would just like talk back and forth, like whip fast. Like, just the dialogue in those scenes was always great because they were just trying to like outsmart each other, or like, you know, catch each other on little like flubs, like little like you know, knowledgeable like flubs and stuff like that. So I mean, I think the script really helped him out there because, yeah, the script is really great in this film, and it really propels the movie like forward, so like at just a relentless speed because people are constantly talking.
And things they're moving a lot. As much as we talked about how static it would get during some parts, it's also just like they're like run talking half the time. It feels like, because there's just always some flurry of activity going on around them. Like they probably like rebuilt like that set, the Los Alamos, like, you know, town set that they built. That was pretty gnarly. Like, when you think about how much effort went into that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I just kind of want to mention, like, before we move on from like I know two people who were extras in this movie.
Oh, really?
One is
Okay,
one
nice.
is my cousin Calvin, who works on he works for the CIA at Los Alamos in some regard to the systems and algorithms that an AI technology that war games are mutually assured destruction, situation with Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were casting their net for people to be in the movie, Nolan was like, I want to have real scientists, so it looks like they really know what they're doing. So that's how my cousin Calvin Siemens got to be in this movie. But then a guy from my hometown who used to make home movies, you know, that I like grew up watching, he was in this movie in some fashion too. And it just was like, it just blew my mind that many people I had connection to managed to be in this. I didn't see them in it, but I'll have to keep my eye out because I'm probably going to see this in the theater again. Because the small screen will just not be as much. All those people joking about watching this on like portable DVD players deserve to be shot in the head.
Yeah. The one thing we can start wrapping up here pretty soon, but the one thing I did want to touch on was the actual, I guess, sort of the climax of the film, the Trinity test, which to me was a little bit unexpected. I honestly expected them to at least show the dropping of the bomb from the Americans' angle,
on Hiroshima.
Yeah, like not
Yeah.
actually showing anything on the ground, in Japan, or not showing it from the Japanese perspective. But I totally expected them to at least show like the American perspective. But no, they make the climax of this film the Trinity test. And I don't know, what did you think about that? And then also the choice to not portray the actual dropping of the bomb.
Yeah, because it's all kind of wrapped up in that one scene with Gary Oldman, which is a real thing that happened. Like in everything that like Gary Oldman's line about don't bring that crybaby scientist in front of me ever again. That's literally what Truman said. Like where he's like, because yeah, Oppenheimer's having all of his existential, his recompense for creating this thing that is capable of causing so much destruction and suffering. And yeah, like he's caught in the euphoria, like after the bomb drops, like while they're like when they're doing the tests, because when you pair those two moments together, is like I don't know, the like not being able to actually see it for himself until he's seen the newsreels afterwards, because that's how it actually was. So I think it's just because this movie's anchored to his perspective in that way that we don't think that it kind of explains that. And it helps us understand why his point of view changed. But what do you make of because they tease us with this question, which is what did Einstein and Oppenheimer talk about on that fateful day? When he's there to try and get a job from Strauss to be Princeton's physics professor. And what did you think of what was actually said and like what they were talking about? Essentially taking the whole quandary of, well, there was a chance that if we blew up the bomb, we'd destroy the world. The message of the movie was that there was always that chance. And they knew what they did. And like, because like if it blew up right then at the test, or if it happened during the Cold War, or if it happens tomorrow, like in our real world right now, where we are in history, I think that's it's a very obvious point to make, but it was, I didn't feel like it slapped me in the face.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, it was well done. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, he's basically saying that, we sort of kickstarted the end of the world. It doesn't matter if it happens tomorrow or if it happens 200 years from now, but we were the ones who started it. And that's part of what I was saying with like it really left a like grim atmosphere when the lights went up in the theater and everyone was just like, I think because I don't know about you, but like my theater was like 90% old people, like geriatrics. And so when the lights came up, everyone just didn't know what to really do because it's such a somber way to like end the movie.
Well, they had all lived through the Cold War, if they're boomers, they lived it, And see, most of the people in my theater were young because I had to go at 9:15, so it's all of the millennials and the Gen Zers who I saw it with. But yeah, they were all very downcast. No one felt uplifted except for me, I guess. I was
such a good movie.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm in my glories, and everyone else around me was just like, oh, it's like either they thought it was going to be more of a ride and less of a lecture, but and maybe
for sure. I think, there are going to be so many people who go to this movie expecting a typical Christopher Nolan movie who are going to be sorely disappointed. I mean, people just really need to do their research, just do a modicum of research and to realize that that's not what this movie is going to be. And so, that's totally going to happen.
For once, we have a very well-known filmmaker, a known commodity. In a way, he's cheating. He's having his cake and eating it too, because he's doing everything he typically does, but for some reason, it feels like he's giving it to us in an atypical way. So I don't know. Like, on one hand, I'm like, yeah, like this is unlike other Nolan movies, even though it is pretty much it is a Christopher Nolan movie. It's just not a blockbuster. So
Yeah.
I was disappointed how everyone kept on framing his R-rated 3-hour-long historical epic as something that was somehow going to compete with the Gentle Minions 2.0 Barbie fandom situation. Because the Barbenheimer thing, I think, cheapens the substance of the movie we got from Nolan here. And I don't think that the other pairing of the double feature will match it for substance. But I'm going to find out here in a little bit, because we're going to be going this afternoon.
Yeah. Did you one last thing I wanted to ask was when you went to the movie, did you have any encounters with people who are doing the Barbenheimer double feature or anything like that?
Yeah, no, like when I got there, it was packed, like in the lobby.
Yeah.
Because there was people just milling about, and they all, like, all the Jeeps were sold out. People bought those ahead of time, but they had the drink coaster holder things. They were $4 a pop. But I don't know, the Barbie people just bothered me, even though I know I probably shouldn't be saying that, but I just didn't feel like my kind was welcome, because I was actually there for the Oppenheimer, and I was not gonna. I don't know. I am trepidatious about the whole Barbie experience, but but they seemed relatively enthusiastic about it. I'll say that.
Yeah, mine was the same. I mean, I was so surprised to see, I feel as if the audience skewed a lot older than I thought they were going to for Barbie. Just looking at the girls that were in the lobby and stuff, I would say 18 to 35-year-olds, and they all had they were all decked out in pink clothes and Barbie branded or otherwise, and their hairstyles were done up I don't know, like Barbie hairstyles. And I was just really surprised at how just all out some of the girls went for going to this movie, for going to Barbie. And yeah, my theater was packed. I mean, the lobby of the theater, and it's nice to see, in all honesty.
It's true. Yeah, we shouldn't be bitching.
Yeah, just to see a packed movie theater. I haven't seen a movie theater this packed, I don't think, since maybe Spider-Man, the last Spider-Man movie.
And that was nearly a year ago.
Yeah, around Christmas time. Yeah.
Shit. So please do go see Oppenheimer. It's like, who knows what kind of a Christopher Nolan movie we're gonna get next. Before we move on, I just want to bring this to your attention. Did you catch James Woods' name pop up under the producer credits?
No, I didn't.
That is, I will confirm, that is the James Woods, the man himself who was banned from Family Guy, canceled from Family Guy. But he apparently is friends with Charles Roven, who is Nolan's producer, along with Emma Thomas, his wife. And the people who had the rights to the book, American Prometheus, were annoyed that Hollywood hadn't done anything with it, and were fed up with the fact that this movie hadn't been made after 20 plus years. And somebody got it, some guy named Marlowe put it in the hands of James Woods, and then James Woods handed it off to Roven, because they were playing cards that night or something, and then Roven gave it to Nolan. But I also read something that Robert Pattinson gave Nolan a collection of Oppenheimer's speeches as a wrap present after they made Tenet. Okay. And that also kind of, so I don't know, it's just, we don't know who really deserves the credit for this movie happening, but James Woods had a role in it.
Yeah, it's like a butterfly effect type thing. That's really cool. That's a cool story, and pretty funny. Yeah,
cool story, bro. But now onto the Mentionables. Is it starting here? Because I think you're up first here with
a book. Yeah, I got the Wager by David Gran. Read this book this week. I was looking for more David Gran ever since I read Killers of the Flower Moon, and this is his most recent book. And if people don't know, The Wager, this is historical, like nonfiction, and it's a fascinating story though. You would think it is fiction because essentially what The Wager is it's a ship from the 1740s that made its way out of England and then shipwrecked at the bottom of South America. And after the shipwreck, there was a mutiny, and the mutineers made it back to England. But when they got there, the non-mutineers were there too. They had also made it. And so it's just this like larger than life story about, you know, them, this sort of shipwreck and then survival on this island for a couple months, and then eventually them making their way back to England, and then essentially having to like duke it out in court, like the mutineers versus the non-mutineers. And I mean, this guy is so good. Like he's so good at taking these historical events and just spinning them into something that is really narratively pleasing. And so I wholly recommend this.
Right on. It kind of reminds me of The Revenant, you know, in terms of,
Yeah.
you know, just you did me wrong, and then I've gotten you back, buddy. There you go. There we go. Sorry, everyone, we had an iPad get turned on. I've been paying attention to everything in the news relating to the arrest of a suspect in the Long Island serial killer / Gilgo Beach murders. This was always something that was creepy just because it, you know, just seemed to be so prolific, and it, you know, seems so concentrated. And yeah, it's been really something to get a peek at who they believe it was responsible and to find out how they determined it was him. You know, like, you know,
And did they use like pizza crusts?
yeah, no, like they knew that he drove the car that the suspect drove. So they keyed in on him. They followed him around New York City until he dropped a pizza crust, and then they tested the DNA against the sample that they had that they couldn't test 10 years ago, and boom, you know, they have a match. And then they look through the evidence some more, and they go, yeah, there's a weird hair mixed in with this, you know, evidence from this crime scene that also includes his hairs. I wonder whose it is. Oh, it's his wife's hair. Oh, so somehow, you know, like she was brought to like their home, they suspect, and was murdered there. But from what I understand, she's not a suspect. She's filed for divorce, you know, as, you know, one would if you aren't going to support, you know, a loved one who you think is likely a serial killer. Hey, honey, that's okay. Yeah, we're getting done. She really wants to go to Barbie. But yeah, this is the Long Island serial killer case. There'll be a lot more to say about it, but I always like following that stuff, whether it's like court TV or law news. But yeah, YouTube has just been a bonanza of content related to that. Oh, but I'll have to unplug at some point, watch something new, watch something different. Next week, we're going to be checking out a horror classic in the making, if the critics are to be believed, something called Talk to Me. And yeah, go see Oppenheimer, put on sunscreen, drink water, and if you're, you know, in the city of Fargo, thank your local policeman, I guess. Peace out, everybody.
Yep. See ya.